Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, where we talk BYU, Big 12, and of course, conference realignment. Today, we continue our ACC spotlight going around the conference to talk to fans of the member schools to get their takes on realignment. And today, we've got one that's a bit different from the others that we've hit up so far. So, if you like talking realignment, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to continue to catch the rest of this series and our other content that we put out. And please let us know your thoughts in the comments. I do my best to read every comment and respond to as many as I can. I love the conversation. That's why we do this. So anyway, now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, I would like to introduce our guest tonight. We have my fellow members of the College Huddle, the largest independent college sports community online, Patrick and Ty from the third Banner Pod, here to talk about Louisville. Welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, hey Trevor, thanks for having us on. We're always excited to talk about conference realignment. We feel that it's a never-ending topic, and one that, being in the ACC and not one of those big two conferences, that we're always looking at and hoping for the best as the chess pieces keep moving.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me, Trevor. We're all excited about this. It's pretty cool to do the College Huddle, the College Huddle thing and meet other pods and other people. So it's pretty cool. And it's exciting topic with conference realignment. So.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I love having other guests on, talking to them, getting their points of view. And the College Huddle has been really great for that, as we've got schools from across the country that we can reach out to, talk to, get their takes, and especially on something like realignment that affects all of us. And that's why I've been doing it, even though kind of coming from a BYU Big 12 angle, it's been a lot of kind of an echo chamber of points of view, from the Big 12. And so I like to go through the ACC and say, we're all looking at the ACC now. I feel like this is the next wave that's going to hit. And so I want to go and get the perspective from fans and these schools that are likely to be affected by it. But before we get into realignment, you guys got to answer me one question. What is the correct pronunciation of your city and school?
Pat, you want to go with that?
Yeah, it's Louisville, not Louisville, not Louisville, Louisville. Which is it's hard to describe how to pronounce that. It just becomes natural when you live here.
It is, and then you're like me, and I live kind of in the country, so I have that little country accent, and I can't say it right either. I've lived here my whole life, so Louisville is how I say it, but.
Okay, because I grew up probably saying like Louisville, like a lot of people.
Yeah. A lot of people do.
I think I might even say it even more. And I've watched videos on people from Kentucky that can't even agree on the correct pronunciation on it. But I think I say it more, like my mouth is full of marbles now. It's like Louisville, and
that's kind of the marble thing. That's kind of how you're supposed to say it.
Yeah.
Okay. Marbles, Louisville.
Louisville. All right. Perfect. Well, good. I feel a little bit vindicated in that. So, all right. So great. So now we are going to get on with talking about Louisville, which is a little bit unique. As I mentioned at the top of the video, that we right now we've kind of gone through and talked to a lot of the schools, that are in the center of the litigation with the ACC, and also other schools that are kind of longstanding ACC members, some of the old blood. But right now we've got you guys, which are one of the newer members, maybe the newest member of the conference, even though it's not so new anymore. You've been in there for a while, and your situation is a little bit different than some of the schools we've talked to so far. But actually, before we even get into that, you guys have talked a little bit about, I keep getting ahead of myself, a little bit about conference realignment, but what are your thoughts, big picture, on just all that's happening in realignment and its impact on the sport?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think it's constant movement. It's constant as a team, and I'm sure BYU fans feel the same. For someone that's not in the Big Two conference, it's constant worry, um, and it's a money thing. Obviously, it's all about studios, eyes on the product, and how much money that can generate your conference. So I feel like obviously the Big Ten and the SEC hold all the cards, and the cards are, if I add you to my conference, are you going to make my conference more money, whether it's right now or in the future? Um, but it's one of those things. I mean, we've been going through conference realignment for pushing on. I mean, conference realignment has gone back to, you know, the beginning of college athletics, but it's really picked up steam probably in the last decade or so. And I think the big thing is it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like the college sports fans version of Bravo TV. There's constant like backdoor channeling, constant talking crap about your conference or people in other conferences trying to go behind someone's back to make sure you're in the best position. Um, and it's drama, man. I'd say that's the biggest word for it for me is constant drama, which is what makes it interesting and why we talk about it a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Pat.
it is.
No, sorry. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, sorry, Ty. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Pat hit on it, and that was kind of my point too. Like, the drama of it. It's just nonstop drama. It drives clicks. It gets people involved, and people watching, and um, the money part is the biggest thing. It's all about money and who can make the most and who can position themselves to make even more money. And all that sounds cool and all when it comes to TV money and and TV rights and everything. But I think my thing with conference realignment that really just sucks is it's just hurting the other sports. Like it's great for football, right? Like putting Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC with an already stacked SEC lineup sounds great, but it's really hurting the other sports. And I think we're going to see that in the ACC with Stanford and Cal joining this year. Like it's just going to hurt the other sports like women's basketball and volleyball and the other all those sports. So that's the saddest part to see. And then also you lose just so many of those like long time regional rivalries. Like I'm sure we'll even get into this further, but like for Louisville fans, we miss the days of playing like West Virginia in the Big East. Like those were some of the most fun football games ever. And that
Cincinnati.
and Cincinnati is another one. So you just lose out on so many of those and they're just going away and away the further we go along. But the drama is the main draw, man. It just gets everyone involved and everyone's eyes on it. And obviously that's why we talk about it so much.
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely. You guys already mentioned it. The inevitable move to it seems like to a power two structure, especially in terms of football, and that's I think where the ACC comes in is how many and which of the ACC schools get absorbed into these power two conferences and where does it end? Recently, there was a proposal that went out about an 80-team super league, and they talk about it as a super league, but in many ways, because it would be broken up into 10-team regional divisions, it would end up looking a lot more like it used to look. So in many ways, it's a step back. It's just a new structure, maybe a way to, as you mentioned, kind of remove football from the other sports and kind of take the money aspect with the private financing and all that into college football, but also kind of get back to the rivalries and things. So I don't know if you guys have what your take is on that. Would you be more open to something like that, or do you think that, I mean, I think it's a long shot, but if it were possible to build to something like that, would that be something that you guys would be more interested in?
Yeah, I mean, as from a Louisville perspective, and really from a college fan perspective, um, I think it'd be something that would be awesome because from a Louisville standpoint, we're not guaranteed to be a part of the Big Two if the Big Two is a thing. But if you say, hey, there's going to be 8, 10 team leagues, we're pretty safe in that situation. And the proposed or the whatever they've come out with where they show the 8, 10 team leagues, we are a part of it. So I think when I'm looking at it from our perspective and being safe and being able to compete at the top level of college football, then it's extremely attractive because without that, I'm not sure if we'll be in the Big Two. And if they break off, then we're not competing at the highest level. And as a football fan, as a Louisville fan, you want to be able to compete at the highest level. I also think back to Ty's point previously is if you do that for football reasons, then your conferences can then go back more to aligning um, to their regional, uh, and rivalry teams for the other sports, for basketball, men's and women's, for baseball, and I think that's attractive for those other sports. Is if you can separate the two, which is hard to do, and come up with the power league, and then reorganize the conferences back to what they kind of looked like before this latest round of realignment, you have something that's attractive on both scales. And I think outside of a Louisville point of view, just as a college football fan, I think the NFL's kind of in a backhand way involved in this pushing this power league, super league idea. And trying to make it more like the NFL, the playoff system and everything. And listen, the NFL season and the playoffs, when you combine them together, are for most fans the most entertaining complete season of any sport. So if you can do something that's being pushed by them and they may have some control over you, you got to think good things will probably happen. So I'm for it both as a Louisville fan and as a college football fan in general.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll share just as we're talking about it. This is the proposed divisions coming out for this was posted by Sportico. So I don't know if this is what the group is officially looking at. And this one, Louisville is in the Midwest, there with a lot of the Big Ten teams, along with Cincy. What would you make of being in this being your division?
Yeah, I mean, from a competitive standpoint, you look and you say Michigan and Ohio State. Those are going to be the guys that you've got to, compete with if you want to be at the top of the conference. But after that, you have some teams that have some tradition, like a Michigan State, some teams that have been good recently, like a Missouri and even a few years ago, Cincinnati. And then really you have some teams that are historically pretty bad at football in Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois, and Indiana. So being able to be in a league like that, and if you're saying the top two make the playoffs, it's going to be hard to knock off of Michigan and Ohio State. But, being that third team that can sneak into the number 2 spot when one of them have a bad year, I think, then you're competing with a Michigan State and probably a Mizzou. And I think we can hold our ground with those guys. So from that standpoint, it looks great. From a, regional standpoint in terms of rivalries, I mean, the Cincinnati getting to play them again would be awesome. I guess we kind of have somewhat of a rivalry with Indiana. But the rest of these guys, I mean, I couldn't tell you the last time we played a lot of these schools. So that feel, going back to what Ty said, and having that hatred of another fan base or hatred for that school and wanting to just, pummel them on the field isn't quite there. But yeah, no, do I think we could make the playoffs out of that division? Yeah, if Michigan or Ohio State are having a down year, I think we could.
Yeah, what I like even better is, so I did a video on this and I made a proposal, and I like my divisions even better because what I did is I tried to go back to these old school. I use the old logos, conferences as much as possible, and this one would have basically put the Big East back together. You have, and probably need slightly different shades of blue here, but you got Boston College, Syracuse, Rutgers, Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Cincy, Louisville, and Notre Dame even included in that Big East division, which to me is much closer to getting those old rivalries back together.
What do they always say? Sometimes you got to go back to move forward. You're really pulling at the heartstrings with the Big East, man. Like that, as a Louisville fan, those were just the prime days. Like we all loved being in the Big East, and it kind of fit us. Like it seemed off at first, but it really fit us with both basketball and football. So that is a pretty cool idea, and I think it's cool, like bringing back the Big Eight, the Southwest Conference. Like that's all cool.
Yeah.
I would be curious to see where Notre Dame would fit in that. Like, would Notre Dame actually join the Big East, or would they be like a Big Ten? I would almost lean Big Ten if they were forced, but that's just my opinion.
Well, here's my thought is they can only have 10 teams, and the Big Ten has had 10 since like the 1800s, before they started adding Penn State and Michigan State. Michigan reversed that in order, but and then all the other schools. So I think the original 10, Notre Dame has resisted to join the Big Ten. I don't think they get bailed out now because it's a new system. I think they go back to the Big East where they played in, all other sports outside of football, even though it wasn't a traditional football rivalry in that sense. But anyway, this was just a fun thought exercise. I don't expect it to ever happen, but if I could be made college football czar or something, maybe.
Yeah. Not to suck up to the host, but I like that a lot better than the current proposal of the divisions. There's, like you said, a lot more old names and familiar faces in that scenario.
No, you can keep sucking up. It's okay. So let's move on to what we're looking at right now. So as we mentioned, that the ACC is in the middle of litigation right now, as we know, with Florida State as well as Clemson. They're suing and being countersued, or however all that works out. And so, what do you guys make of that? Like, do you see? I guess, do you see Louisville ever getting involved in that, starting some of its own litigation, or is the university really more on the side? Because they were rumored as part of has been deemed the Magnificent Seven. So many people take that as, oh, Louisville would like to get out of the ACC. Do you see them being part of that, or do you think that they're more hey, we'd rather keep this together because we're not sure how this is all going to shake out and whether we're going to end up ahead or behind, or, where do you think Louisville is on all that?
I'd say, our athletic department, I couldn't begin to, tell you what kind of back channeling or anything that's going on. But from a fan base perspective, I think you've got a part of the fan base that wants the ACC to stay together as long as possible so that Louisville can continue to try to make a name for itself and be an option for one of these, Power Two, if that's the way it goes. Louisville, from a football perspective, has always kind of been underdog in the sense that we're not, your Alabamas or a big time power, but every so often we'll have a year where we've got the Heisman Trophy winner and Lamar Jackson, or we're going to the Orange Bowl as a one loss team, or we're in the national title hunt before we lose to Rutgers. So we've got this brand that's almost there, and we think now we might have a coach that can get us there. And so if you give us 5 years to see if that works out, and see if we can maybe sneak into the playoffs 2-3 of those 5 years, then if this conference starts crumbling, then you've got a better shot of maybe the SEC or the Big Ten saying, hey, these guys are football powers. They bring eyes to the TV sets. We need to figure out how to get them into our conference. Then you've probably got another group of fans that is pissed at the ACC. They don't like Swafford, the commissioner. They haven't really felt like we belong in the ACC since we've been there, because you get this sense even when you're watching a game and a referee goes against you and you're playing a North Carolina team, you're like, these are the old heads and they're going to get the calls. So you've got a part of the fan base that's like, I mean, if these other people want out, let's get out and go to see if the Big 12 will want us. We'll join you guys, BYU there. And we get to connect with some of our old pals in Cincinnati and West Virginia. And they just feel like we fit those schools and what they mean and the culture more so than the ACC. I want to play big boy football. So I kind of am more with those first fans. I want the ACC to survive long enough for us to hopefully be in a better position. But listen, at some point, like you've said, the ACC's the needle that's gonna move all this. And if that happens and I can't be in the Big Two, then I sure as heck want to make sure I'm in the Big 12.
Awesome. So, Ty, which of those two camps do you fall in, or are you in a third?
So I'm glad Pat mentioned that, because I'm definitely in the camp of, I don't care if the ACC blows up tomorrow. And that's probably not the best, like, media take on the ACC, but it's just, I've always felt like we haven't really fit in the ACC. There's been so many instances of, games and things like that to just go so wonky that ever since we've been in the ACC, I've always kind of resented it. Um, it's my personal opinion. Like, I would love to join the Big 12 if it went that way. I don't foresee, like, back to the original question, like, I don't foresee Louisville joining the litigation or anything against these. I don't see Louisville joining that. But I also know that regardless of where you stand on, keeping the ACC alive or looking elsewhere, I know Louisville fans probably feel a certain way and probably feel a little worried, because when we went through conference realignment the first time, we had Tom Jurich as our athletic director, who's one of the best athletic directors of all time, regardless of how you feel about him as a person or whatever. He's one of the best ADs ever. And he perfectly, surfed the waves there to get us into the ACC, and he did a magnificent job. Um, and I'm
And
not,
even before that, the Big East.
yeah, and in the Big East too. So, and this is not me like throwing shade on Josh Hurd, our current AD, but he hasn't obviously been in that situation yet. So I think a lot of people are, kind of curious to see how he's going to maneuver that. Um, but I'm definitely in the camp of, get us in the Big 12. It's the best fit. Like, I want to play West Virginia and Cincinnati and a lot of those schools again. Like that's the main thing. When I would go to these football games, I want to go have fun, and I do want to play big boy football too, but I don't want to do it at the sake of having to play schools that just we don't geographically fit with. Like we've never played before. It's a give and take situation, but I personally feel like we're a great fit for the Big 12, and I'd love to if that happened.
Yeah, and I mean, Patrick, with let's assume that Florida State and Clemson are gone before those 5 years, before you feel like Louisville's reached its peak. If they're gone sooner than later, as they're in the thick of all this, is the ACC still as appealing to you? Losing two of the big, powerhouse brands in terms of football.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I think, if you're Josh Hurd, our athletic director, you really have to be looking at all options. And if the best option out there is the Big 12 saying, hey, we know that grant of rights is out there, but it looks like it's about to be broken, and you need to say yes or no right now, then I'm definitely in the camp that you say yes, because even though I want to be in that power two situation, a Big 12 that seems pretty healthy at this moment is a much better place to be than an ACC that is not so healthy, and obviously has the ongoing litigation. And it'll be interesting when we talk about that litigation to see what other teams potentially join. Does UNC, where that's the ACC's bread and butter school, in ACC country in North Carolina, you got to think they're attractive from an academic standpoint and from a viewership standpoint, a new state standpoint, to the Big Ten, and even to the SEC. Do they file for litigation? I think that's, if you're talking about a big ball dropping in this ACC madness, I think that's the big ball that drops, is if a North Carolina school that is the conference's darling, they're basketball, football, women's basketball. I mean, they're seen as competitive in all of those, and they're in headquarter lands. If they bring some litigation against the ACC, that's when I think Louisville needs to seriously consider starting to make a move on their own. And I think we'd be naive to say right now that we're not doing anything. I'm sure we're back channeling all these conferences, but that's when you publicly probably need to say, hey, we are looking at every option.
UNC is the big one. UNC is the big one that is going to really move the needle. And I understand your point about Clemson, but like Pat said, UNC is the big one for them. And if they decide to join that, then look out.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely, if UNC starts getting in the mix, that it's all going to blow up, although it may anyway, regardless. So there's just so many variables that could take place. So let's assume going forward, the ACC essentially implodes, that, what we saw kind of happen with the Pac happens with the ACC. How do you like your chances looking? I mean, you guys have mentioned the Big 12 a lot, which we'll get into because, that's a scenario that's discussed a lot. But let's look at these other two, because obviously it would be Louisville's, the administration's primary responsibility to try to get into one of these Power 2 conferences. As we know, the SEC kind of has a gentleman's agreement of, hey, let's not add any more schools from states where we already have existing members. They did it for Texas. Don't know if Louisville is at that same brand level, a big brand, but not at the level of Texas. Really, nobody is in many ways. So, would Texas overlook that, or sorry, would the SEC overlook that to bring in Louisville, or are there other options? And then looking at the Big Ten, Louisville's not an AAU member, and it would, fit, geographically in the sense of you're not as far of a reach, but they've shown that they're willing to go to the West Coast to pick up members just to get big enough brands. And so geography other than getting new geography, the proximity to the Big Ten may not necessarily be as advantageous as we once thought it would be in realignment time. So how do you feel about Louisville's odds of getting into either one of those conferences if everything falls right for you?
Yeah. I'd like to be optimistic, but I'm not. It's kind of if you could look at this in a situation where you combine some aspects of both conferences. If the Big Ten wasn't gung ho about adding teams that academically fit their profile, and listen, I'm a Louisville graduate. I've had a successful career so far with my Louisville degree, but we don't stack up academically with the Big Ten schools, and I think that's a big theme for their presidents. If they would look past that, I think adding Louisville would get them into a new state. The Louisville market, from a TV standpoint, is the best in college basketball, which I know is not what's moving this. And you look at our TV ratings for football, and they're when we're good, they're very good. So I think there's some attractiveness there if the Big Ten can get past the academic standpoint, but I don't think. I think we're a non-starter for them because of that. And then, as you mentioned with the SEC, I just don't see the advantage to them adding us from a market standpoint, because you already have that market with the University of Kentucky and Lexington. Then you add to the fact that UAK is going to throw a fit, is I think if we were even brought up. And like you said, we're not Texas. Texas A&M throwing a fit about Texas, and you saying, sorry guys, Texas is not like going to UAK and saying, sorry guys, Louisville is Louisville. So yeah.
On a counterpoint, just to stick up for you guys a little bit, I don't know if Kentucky has the same sway that, some of these other schools have. So if there's any, when people talk about Clemson, they already have SC, but Clemson you can go to South Carolina and be like, look, you're South Carolina. What have you done for us? And
Right.
In terms of football, Kentucky, sure, they've been, quite a bit better than, they had been traditionally, the last 2 or 3 years or so. But they're still, reputationally not there yet at football.
Yeah.
So, you could see a case in which they'd be like, look, UK, I know you don't like this, but I do think most likely you're right. Unfortunately for Louisville fans, that, it's probably going to be impediment. Just, is there enough reasons versus, some of the other schools that would come into play from the ACC, like, schools that are in North Carolina or Virginia, or maybe even other schools in Florida. Who knows?
Yeah. And then, like, you add to it, like, it's not just like going to UK and saying you're like, they wouldn't even go to bat for us. Like, I think that's something that people would have to understand is UK and the Louisville and UK rivalry is so deep and it's so petty that it even goes into like politics, and they wouldn't even go to bat for us if we were on the table. It would be an automatic no. So I kind of agree with Pat. I don't see any chance unless the Big Ten just close their eyes and overlook the whole academic thing. I don't see U of L joining the Big Ten, and When it comes to the SEC, we would just have no help from our in-state rival to join, which is silly when you think about it. It would really help the state, but it's just too petty. They wouldn't help us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the number is the biggest thing. If these two big conferences stop at 20, 22, I don't like our chances. If they start going higher, 20, if you're talking about 24 teams in each conference, I begin to feel a little bit more positive that the SEC will overlook some of that same state stuff to get us in there. I have the Big Ten to me is just a pipe dream, even though I think from a football college athletics standpoint, we would be a good fit and could make a good case. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, you'd mentioned politics, and that's what's funny about all this is that when the Big East, all the teams were reading the tea leaves and seeing that, okay, the big, we don't want to go down with the ship, and everyone's trying to get out of there. Politics came involved with West Virginia and Louisville and trying to get schools in, and both of you guys were jockeying for position. And it's funny because West Virginia really wanted to get into the ACC, but ultimately they're in the Big 12, and now here you are in the ACC. Things aren't looking so great there, and you're talking about better fit ultimately long term in the Big 12. A lot of maybe more similarly minded schools. A lot of schools. There's no more blue bloods left in the conference, but a lot of teams that have gone in and done damage in their time. And then in terms of basketball, Louisville is certainly a fit. Geographic rival. I mean, now we've got Cincy, we've had West Virginia, and so I think Louisville would be a tremendous ad for the Big 12. And you guys have already mentioned that, that you would like that. Would you, right now, sitting where you're at, would you prefer that outcome to staying in the ACC?
I would for
Ty,
sure.
you already said that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would for sure. It just makes more sense to me. And I'm only thinking from me as a fan, like, and Pat knows this too. Some of the best Louisville football memories were those West Virginia and Cincinnati games. I'll always remember, like, going into Morgantown and beating them, and I'll always remember the blackout game against West Virginia in the rainy game with Teddy throwing that long touchdown to Devontae against Cincinnati. I'll always remember that. So that's for me for sure. I would love to go to the Big 12.
I don't know if you guys remember. Oh, sorry. There was an old ESPN ad, and if anybody watching can find it, because I've looked on YouTube, tried to find it, but it was like I think it was Big East like ad on ESPN, and they're just showing all these like rival fan bases doing things together. I think there's like someone holding the like elevator door, and they were rival fans. They're all being really nice, and then they were like guys out at a restaurant or something. And I think this is what I'm picturing, but with the beard, and it was like Louisville and Cincy, and he like wipes something off the other guy's face, and it was just like I don't know. It was very comical. I went looking for it at one point, trying to find it for something else, another video I was doing, and I couldn't find it, but I thought it was pretty funny. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of good rivalries from that time and era. It would be great to bring back. On the other hand, I feel like there's a lot of Big 12 fans out there that are proponents of, they're just waiting for the ACC to implode, to die, and to get picked off. And because we can add schools like Louisville, perhaps, who knows which other schools, Pitt, Virginia Tech, NC State, maybe, Duke or Georgia Tech, who knows? Maybe there's some other schools, but those are the main ones that are discussed. And it's true. I think all those schools bring a lot. For me, the fear is, the Big 12 would get stronger, but guess who gets even stronger? The Big 10 and the SEC are going to be adding even bigger brands. So I do think Louisville would be a great fit in the Big 12. And I'm actually East Coast, although I don't know if I'd make it up all the way to Louisville for a game, but maybe I would. It's within a a reasonable enough distance. But so in that sense, selfishly, I'd like to have more games on the East Coast with BYU. But it'd certainly be interesting to see if that's how it ends up playing out. I did some other videos gaming out, what are these different scenarios? How big if do the conferences want to get? How many teams are they going to go for? And no matter now, I'm changing my mind after having these conversations and doing this series of videos on perhaps some of those outcomes. But one that I still don't see is, Louisville being able to make it into one of those Power 2, I guess, unless like you said, if they keep going, if they're going to 24 or 30 teams, you get to 30 teams each, that starts, increasing odds. But I know that BYU's odds in those situations are still going to be pretty low. They'd have to get pretty big before, you get down the list, not being AAU and being a private religious institution, it's just being out West, there's just a lot of reasons why they wouldn't, although I think that BYU would add stuff. I'm not trying to slam BYU, just knowing that with the limitations of what the reality is, and so I empathize with you guys as a fan base that sees, kind of this dire situation of the way realignment is shaking out.
Yeah, no, it's very stressful. It's again, I enjoy conference realignment. There's many Louisville fans that don't. But I kind of feed off stress, so that might be why. I guess when you're looking at it from like a BYU or a Louisville perspective, I think the hope, other than that pipe dream of the Big Two or someone coming in and saying that, hey, we're going to do this Super League, the hope is that there's a Big Three and that you're in that Big Three. And that the third conference might not have as big a slice of the pie as the other two conferences, but you can still make a playoffs and compete for a national championship. I think that's what the realistic dream is for a Louisville fan, is that you get into a third conference, whether it's called the Big 12 or whether the ACC and the Big 12 combine and it's called something else, and that you still have a seat at the table, even if it's not as big of a seat. The worry in that situation, at least my worry, is that you're still included, but 5 years from now, the money is so different that you're there, but you're not really there. The third conference is in the playoffs, but never really has a chance. So, looking at all of that stuff, it's a little bit bleak, but you hope that you make inroads and you get into this third power conference, and maybe TV starts to realize that, the SEC and the Big Ten, they have all these brands, but without, your other traditional teams, you're losing a lot of fans if you consolidate to just two conferences that have a chance to compete. So yeah, I think that's the realistic dream for Louisville, is you're still at the table, and hopefully there's some type of evening out of the money situation at some point.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's Big 12 just has to feel like they need enough brands, enough prowess, enough, just enough there that they can't be completely discarded and overlooked and excluded from whatever college, shape college football takes going forward at the highest level, even if it is a watered down version of what the other two have. And that's really sad and speaks a lot to the state of our, of college football, because I think that is what makes it special, is these traditional rivalries and these, the regionality of it and all that. And it's being, torn away just to get the biggest brands together, which before that was what's made bowl games and made the postseason exciting, was because you were getting, these unique matchups. You were getting, a Big Ten and a Pac-12 champion playing each other in the Rose Bowl. Now that's just going to be an in-conference game. Like, you lose some of that of what makes that unique, and special when you just put everybody together and it becomes regular season, and it just becomes a watered down version of the NFL. Because it's not going to be as good, and it's just, like you mentioned, the NFL model. So for me, I don't like it, but it is inevitable. And so at this point, it is everyone's jockeying to get in the best position that they can going forward. So having said that, how would you guys rate your chances, or what that likelihood of each outcome of where Louisville ends up through this next wave of realignment between staying in the ACC, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, or other, whatever shape that takes, whether it's a reformed ACC or whatever. But between those different outcomes, what would you put as the likelihood of each one happening?
Ty, I'll let you go first on
that. Like we had previously discussed, I think in terms of something joining like the Big Ten, I would think as of right now that's a 0 out of 10. I just, and it would, the academic thing they would have to completely just overlook. And then at that point, if they do, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like geographically, everything, I think it makes a lot of sense. SEC doesn't look too promising either. I personally do think I could see a scenario where the Big 12 is possible. As a third conference that just has a lot more brands. Like, I think that's the Big 12's goal, right? Just keep adding more brands, more teams. I could definitely see a scenario of joining the Big 12. But as of right now, man, until I see it otherwise, the ACC grant of rights looks pretty ironclad to me. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand all that stuff. But everything that I've just seen over the years, it just seems like it's impossible to get out of. And I think Florida State is probably going to have a wake up call here soon when they really, dive deep into that and get that to court, because it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think our immediate future is the ACC. My personal preference, I'd love to be in the Big 12 one day. Just as a fan, I just think it'd be more fun, but I think our immediate future is the ACC, and that's probably going to be that way for the foreseeable future.
What do you put the likelihood on that? Like 80, 90%, 70?
If we're moving conferences, I would say the Big 12 is the most likely. I would give that probably a 7 or 8 out of 10. SEC probably a 4 out of 10.
Gotcha.
Wow.
I think I kind of like looking at this stuff of, I mentioned 5 years a lot. So I'll do it based off of where I think Louisville will be in 5 years, percentage wise. I'd say the Big Ten, because of all we've talked about it, is probably like a 5% or less. I'd say the SEC is probably like a 15%. So there's like a 1 in 5 chance that Louisville in 5 years is in one of the Power 2. So then the question becomes, will the ACC still be around, or will we be looking at another conference? And like Ty, I think, it's hard to go against those grant of rights until someone, puts a nail or cuts into that fabric. But the process has started. So I'm not as confident as him that, we'll still be there in 5 years. I'd probably go with 80% left on my 100% thing. I'd probably go 50%. We're in a conference that looks like the Big 12 with a few ACC schools, and probably 30% that the ACC is still alive and kicking, but there's a lot of people that don't like each other in the conference. And
All right.
if you do all those scenarios, I think I'm fine with. Of those two, I'd rather be in the Big 12 with in a much more amicable situation than an ACC with a bunch of people that want out that can't get out.
Well, awesome, guys. I appreciate you coming on and talking Louisville with us, and and the future of the ACC. Where can everybody find you guys and all your content?
You can find you can find us on the Third Banner Pod. If you look up Third Banner Pod on YouTube, X, we're also on Spotify as well. And we talk pretty much all Louisville sports, primarily basketball and football. Obviously, with the basketball transfer portal stuff, that's a lot of our content right now. But we'll dive in deep into football stuff soon enough. And yeah, you can find us on those, and you can find us on Twitter and all that good stuff. So
perfect. Well, I'll make sure all of that is in the comment section. So do go check them out and give them some support on their stuff. And thank you again for coming on, and best of luck.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I think maybe, as we've mentioned, maybe we'll be playing BYU here in a few years. So if so, we'll get together. We'll invite you to a U of L game and buy you a refreshment, whether that's a beer or a Coke.
Yeah, it'd have to be on the soft drink side of things. What's that?
I was gonna say, yeah, thanks for having us on, Trevor. And if it does happen that way, you said your soft drink side, but worst case, we'll get you some of our finest bourbon out here in Bourbon. So we'll get you that good stuff, man.
Hopefully the game isn't that bad. It was almost that bad when I went to West Virginia this last year. So, all right, guys, thanks so much, and we'll catch you later.